Okay, next on the agenda, moving right along. Appointed in March 2011, Chairman Scott is head of the ICC, which oversees both retail electricity, gas, and utilities, as well as other things like trucking and towing and other odds and ends. Prior, at least as far as I'm concerned, those are odds and ends, you know. Power and gas, that's the big stuff. Prior to joining the Illinois Commerce Commission, Chairman Scott served as director of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and helped develop a regional cap and trade system. Chairman Scott also has served as mayor of Rockford, Illinois, and as an Illinois state representative from the 67th District. Please welcome Chairman Scott to the podium.
Well, thanks very much, David. Good morning. I am going to use the podium. I tell you, I haven't played competitively in basketball in 35 years, and I was ready to suit up and give Coach however many minutes I could today. That was great to hear him. So thanks very much for having me, and Jeffrey, good to see you again, and thanks very much for coming. He looked at me when he said Marquette, because I was a Marquette grad, and so we had a brief moment about that ahead of the time today. So, but it was okay. So he still talked to me, even though Marquette eliminated Miami. But they had a great team, and if you guys follow college basketball, I mean, what a great guy and a great coach, and has really done so much with so many different programs and resurrecting them. So it's you had a real winner that you were able to pick today. So it was very nice to be able to follow him. I wish I could talk hoops, but we're going to talk a little bit about the electricity market here in Illinois and the competitive market here in Illinois. And if you have questions or things that don't make any sense while I'm talking, ask them now. I know we've got a panel coming up later where people can ask questions and talk about it, but if you feel more comfortable right now and something you want to get out, please do now, because that's a little bit easier, I think, and probably better for us to work on things as we're going through it. So talk a little bit about kind of a 101 of the kind of the history of competition here in Illinois. We're one of the states, not a majority of the states in the country, pretty strong minority of states in the country that actually have retail competition. For most of the states, they have what they're called vertically integrated. That means that the same company owns the production of power as well as the distribution, or they're responsible for buying the power and distributing it. Here in Illinois, back in the mid-90s, a lot of states, Illinois being one of them, started looking at trying to do things competitively, seeing if we could do something for prices here in the state. At the time, and I was in the legislature at the time, Illinois not only had the highest power prices in the Midwest, we were one of the highest power prices in the entire country. And there was a group that you might have heard that was going to save the world called Enron out of Houston, that was going around state to state and trying to convince legislatures that there was a better way. Turned out there was a better way, just not with Enron. So that we ended up working on a committee, and I was actually on that committee for 2 years, where we worked on actually putting together the legislation that led to competition here in the state. And what that basically means, you've got three parts of the energy supply network. You've got generation, the power plants themselves, a distribution system, what gets it to your business, what gets it to your home, and the transmission to carry it to the distribution system from the power plants. The distribution and generation systems, by the law that we passed in the mid-90s, have to be separated now. And that's what happened for the companies here. You see ComEd and Exelon. ComEd now just a distribution company here in the state. Ameren has two different, has a distribution side and a generation side as well. So that was one of the requirements of the legislation. And the idea behind it was hopefully to bring more competitors in, different people to supply power, different people who could buy it more cheaply and therefore could pass the savings on to the customers. And after having worked in that system now, which took effect in 1999, so over 14 years, we actually think it's worked pretty well here in the state. It didn't work exactly as those of us who were writing the legislation had planned. Nothing ever does, of course, but and especially on the residential side, and I'll just touch briefly on that because we're here to talk about the commercial and industrial side. But from the commercial and industrial side, it actually worked pretty quickly, pretty well out of the gate, and we started to build up more and more alternative suppliers coming into the state. People in the industrial side and the commercial side started to realize greater savings right away through the alternative retail energy suppliers, or ARES as we call them. It set a fixed timetable for the introduction of electric retail choice in Illinois, beginning with the non-residential customers, and that happened on October 1st of 1999. So there's been a good 14-year history of the amount of dollars that have been saved. The interesting thing now, when we look at it, and this is because of a lot of different reasons, not just the competitive nature of Illinois law, but we have now gone to the position where, along with Ohio, we have the lowest prices in the Midwest and among the lower prices in the country. That's not, as I said, due entirely to retail competition, but that's certainly been a part of it as well. It didn't work quite as well on the residential side, and this is about the last thing I'll say about residential, although there are some aspects of residential that affect the commercial industrial side as well. But residential, in our great wisdom at the time in the legislature, we put a 20% rate cut mandated on the residential side, and then we put a rate freeze in effect for 10 years. And of course, that had the great immediate political win for all of the legislators who voted for that, because we could go back to all of our constituents and tell people that we had given them not only a rate cut, but a rate freeze for the next 10 years. But it also probably told anybody who was even thinking about getting into the competitive business that it probably wasn't really economically viable to get into the business of selling alternative supply of power here in the state. And that's exactly what happened on the residential side for 10 years. And then when the rate caps came off, of course, prices went up dramatically, as anything would if they'd been sitting there for 10 years and not being able to respond to market pressures. Prices went up dramatically. General Assembly, I was out of it by that particular time doing other things. They freaked out again and brought everybody who was concerned with the electric energy industry into large, long debates at the General Assembly, one of which lasted all night, where they brought people in and witnesses and talked about it, and created the Illinois Power Agency, whose job is to do a couple of things out of that. One is to procure the power, because one of the feelings was that the consumers weren't necessarily getting from the incumbents, from ComEd and from Ameren, weren't necessarily getting the best prices that could be gotten out there. And so the idea was that the Power Agency would help with procurement, and then the Power Agency was also giving other authority, which they have never used to this date, which is that if there wasn't enough power being produced here in the state, they would have the ability to go out and actually build a plant if they wanted to, or to go out and acquire power from other places if there wasn't enough being supplied by the incumbents or by the ARES. So the General Assembly also, during the time of competition, obviously the Commission has certain aspects that we regulate of that. We used to regulate all the generation as well as all of the distribution, and now we don't regulate the generation side of the business at all. We just regulate the distribution. But a Office of Market Development was created within the Commission to try to work on these issues and try to provide as much information as we can to customers or people who are thinking about doing that. So if you either get to us through our own website or through plugin.org, which is our Office of Market Development website, or call the people who work in that division, you can find out who the licensed people are to supply power in the state. You can find out what their offers are, what they're offering for customers out there, and all of that information has been very helpful on both the commercial industrial side as well as on the residential side. Currently, as we stand here today, about 75% of all of the power that's supplied in Illinois to commercial industrial customers is supplied by an alternative retail energy supplier. So it's not ComEd and Ameren that people are getting through the Illinois Power Agency. It's not them that's supplying the power. You're buying it from other places, from other suppliers, which is part of the reason why you're here today. And this is talk a little bit about the Ameren zone, since that's where we are right now in the MISO territory. Ameren, of course, picked up 3 different companies, picked up the territories of 3 different companies, and so they have 3 different rate zones here in the state, but the percentages are all roughly about the same. For smaller commercial customers, right about 55% of the smaller commercial customers are using an alternative supplier. 76 to 80% of the medium commercial industrial customers, 82% of the large customers to 90% roughly. And for customers that use over 1 megawatt, you're looking at somewhere between 80 and 94%. One of the things to ask is, which we do, is why are those numbers the way that they are, and is there some way that smaller commercial customers can take more advantage the way that the larger customers have? Well, there's a lot of things that play into that, of why that doesn't necessarily occur. Obviously, if you're in the business of selling power and you can sell to a much larger customer, that's lucrative as well. But again, a lot of the smaller commercial customers don't own their own buildings, so they're not, a lot of times they're not making the power supply choices themselves. They may not have, if you run a small business, you're a 2-person shop, or you run a restaurant, or you run a dry cleaners, you may not have somebody that works for you that is involved in those kinds of decisions or has that kind of expertise. And so there are people, as we'll hear from today, there are people who are in the business of helping do that, but you may not even know where to go to ask those particular questions or to hire somebody. So the idea that one of the things that we want to do, and why we appreciate being able to come to things like today, is to talk and tell people that there are choices out there, and like you would with any other product that you're buying in your supply chain or anything else that you would do even in your personal lives, get as much information as you can and try to compare, because there may be something that better suits your needs, different pricing options, different timing options that may be available. If you're interested in doing some things with renewable energy, there may be companies out there that want to do that for you as well, because a lot of you may be in businesses where your supply chain dictates that you're greener. If you're in Walmart's supply chain, for example, they're dictating that folks be greener. You may want to buy an energy supply that has a renewable energy component to it, and there may be people that are out there, there are people that are out there who will sell you that kind of energy and make that work for you. So so those numbers that we see, if you talk about industrial especially, and especially the larger ones, are actually pretty good. I mean, those are pretty big numbers. In fact, in one of the Ameren rate zones, the customers over 1 megawatt, 94% of the people are using an alternative supplier. So it's been very successful. Again, some of the rates are, again, we went from highest in the Midwest to among the lowest, which is something I noticed that Governor Perry didn't mention when he was here a couple weeks ago, talking to Illinois businesses about the wonders of Texas. You may want to take a look at what Texas power prices are compared to Illinois, and the fact that Texas, being their own little regional market, is relying pretty heavily on demand response, which is the ability of the power supplier to shut off power supplies at different times. They'll compensate you for that, but to shut off power supply at different times because they're worried about some capacity issues as well. And so they're struggling right now with their market, and that's neither here nor there, but I just thought I would mention it as a state official. I feel it necessary occasionally to throw a plug in for the state and the things that we're doing there, even though I'm supposedly independent from all of that. So one of the things that's also interesting to us and bears some discussion, and we keep an eye on it as well, is the number of suppliers that are out there for all of you to make decisions on. How many people do I have a choice from? On the residential side, there are literally dozens of folks that you have to choose from, both in the Ameren territory and in the ComEd territory. People know now that they can call up, even if they're in a municipality that's aggregated their power. At home you can still pick up the phone if you want to and call another supplier and see if they can do something better for you than than the one that your municipality has decided upon. So having a lot of people, just like it is in any other market-driven enterprise, having a lot of people supplying that power, that energy, just you would think, without going deeper into it, just at first blush, you'd say, well, that would be better from a competition standpoint. And we think that that's true. So we also look at the concentration, how many people how many of the areas are actually selling power in a particular area. Now, and we look at the actual concentration to see if they're, you don't want to go from one monopoly if you're going to deregulate to another monopoly, because that's not necessarily going to help with competition and with prices. So we're checking that all the time. In the ComEd service territory, there's far less concentration. That means there's more sellers out there. More of the people in the commercial and industrial sector are actually buying power from different places than they are in Ameren. There's far greater concentration in the Ameren service territory. And that could be for a few reasons that we're always trying to explore, and maybe some that you can tell us as we're looking at this issue. In our talks with the suppliers who come in, with the areas who come in and talk to us, we always want to know about the differences in being in the Ameren service territory and being in part of the MISO regional transmission area, as opposed to the PJM, which is where ComEd is. Those are two transmission networks that make sure that there's enough reliability for all the power coming into the area. And we talk with people all the time about that. And there are different market forces. If you're selling power in the Chicago area, there are a lot more people. There's a lot more heavy industry in areas around the city. And so if you're going to get into just one of the service territories, that's probably the one that people are going to choose. We're also told, have been told many times, that just from a bureaucratic process standpoint, much harder to get into MISO than it is to get into PJM. We've been told that many, many times by many, many suppliers, and so that probably limits it as well. But we do want to keep our eye on that because if those concentrations get too high, it really kind of defeats the whole purpose of having competition in the first place. So I want to talk about just a couple, in the couple minutes I have left, just want to talk about a couple of factors that we're looking at. And I'm going to more list these and go through these fairly quickly, and hopefully we'll be able to get into them a little bit more as we go on. But there's a lot of changes in this business. If you go to enough conferences, you'll hear this one over and over, that if Alexander Graham Bell came back today, he wouldn't have any idea what the phone industry has become, and he wouldn't have any idea what this is or what to do with it, or certainly how much you can do with his idea of the telephone. But if Edison came back, he'd recognize the electric system, absolutely. He'd say, yeah, he might have been responsible for putting some of it in. But that's starting to change. What we typically thought of as the electricity system for years and years, which is power plant here, lines here, distribution system here, going to business, that's changing. And now you're starting to see things like companies, and you probably know a lot of these folks, maybe some of you do it yourselves, that supply some of your own power right now. What we call, just for lack of a better term, more specific term, distributed generation, which means that it's not all one centralized power plant sending the power out. It's distributed in a wide variety of places. You may do it at home by putting solar panels on your home or having a geothermal system underneath your house. Schools are putting windmills up. You're starting to see that. Now what you're starting to see are people who are going a little bit larger. Well, I own 4 shopping centers in the Rockford area, so I'm going to put a power plant up that's just going to serve those 4 shopping centers. And that's okay, and it's interesting, and it's good that people are starting. We believe in renewables, and so it's a good thing to have people working on solar and wind and trying to offset some of the power that we need. And if we don't have to build more coal plants, there are some environmental benefits for that. But then the question becomes, for that distribution system that's out there, well, how do we compensate them? Because the guy who has the solar panels on his house or you have it on your business, when the power goes out, odds are, especially if it's a business, he's going to want some kind of backup system for that. And that may mean that he may have to rely on the wires and the old system that he's trying to get away from by putting his own system in. So the question becomes, for regulators like us, how do we compensate folks for that, and how does that play out in prices that are out there going forward? I mentioned demand response. That's the ability to shut off power at different times. You have your power interrupted at different times or cycle off. For some businesses, that makes perfectly good sense. So you're able to do that, and it doesn't affect your business. If you're a factory and you're running 3 shifts, obviously that's not something that you can do. And so, but the push toward demand response is getting higher and higher now, because people are starting to worry a little bit more about whether power is going to be there, and I'll talk about that in just a moment as well. And so demand response is something that you're going to start to see more and more of. In fact, if you look at what PJM projects going forward in terms of their power mixture, they're relying fairly heavily on demand response going forward, as is Texas, as I mentioned earlier. Then there's the idea of capacity markets and the idea of minimum offer prices going in to make sure that we have enough capacity of power to be purchased out there. We worry about that in Illinois because, unlike some of the vertically integrated states that are there, if we think that there isn't enough power being generated in our region to serve our folks, we have to rely on the market out there to be able to provide that power and hope that the transmission system will be able to bring it to Illinois. In the states where they have a vertically integrated system, they're working on what they, a program where they're planning actually for the amount of power that's going to be built in their states. And so that's something that the commissions do with the companies on a regular basis. And so if more power needs to be built, it gets passed on to the ratepayers, it's spread out and passed on to the ratepayers. Here in Illinois, we don't have that. And so occasionally you'll see things like the General Assembly will get involved and want to do a power project. May have heard the words like Tenaska and Power Holdings, Leucadia, some of the other projects that are out there where the General Assembly will actually guarantee through ratepayers that they actually, the people who provide that power actually get compensated for that over time. Although a lot of those have been proposed and gone through various stages, none of them have actually gotten built here in Illinois as well. And we have to worry about those issues here, all of us do, because we're half nuclear and half coal, leaving the part of our system that's renewable out. We're half traditional coal and half nuclear. And we were talking earlier, I don't know what the power mix is going to be 20 years from now, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be that. So we have to start thinking ahead and planning for how much renewables is going to play a part of that. Is distributed generation going to play a larger part in Illinois? Do we want to make sure that the wind companies and the solar companies who are going to build here are able to do that with longer term contracts? That all affects prices as well, as the General Assembly is looking at right now. We're looking at in terms of having so much coal power, the EPA the U.S. EPA is coming up with additional regulations that are affecting and in the future will affect to an even greater degree traditional coal-fired power plants. And if anybody can tell me what the future of nuclear power is going to be in Illinois, please do, and we can probably find a spot for you to help advise us as we go forward. A lot of it now, a lot of what's helped reduce prices here, especially on the residential side, has been that gas prices have been so low and are projected to be fairly low going forward for the next foreseeable future, for the next 5 to 10 years. But those of us who have any age on us at all know that probably over the last 30 years, the most volatile thing has been natural gas prices. Now, fracking obviously changes that dynamic a little bit, but one thing I've learned in this position especially, I hope there are no economists in the room, but that old adage, if you took all the opinions of all the economists and stretched them end to end, they'd never reach a conclusion, I think is pretty much true. And if you talk to 20 economists about what our gas price is going to do in the next 10 years, you probably get 40 opinions as to what's going to happen with those prices. That has a major effect on all of us, every one of us in this room, and on what that fuel mix is going to be going forward as well. So those are things that we all have to think about, as well as more and more companies wanting to get into Illinois because of a competitive market. A lot of people has the ability, and hopefully we're encouraging that to happen, and encouraging competition, encouraging suppliers. We're always looking for ways to do that more. And so part of my message today is not only to get as much information as you possibly can from us or from other sources, but also to work with us. And if you find things that are inhibiting competition in the state, to let us know about that, and hopefully we can all work together and continue to have what we've had for the last 15 years, which is a steadily declining power prices here in the state, which is obviously it's good for all of us at home, but for those of you who are moving the economy forward by hiring people and making other business decisions here in the state, it's obviously good for you as well. So with that, let me stop, and I'll take any questions now, or we'll move on and then look forward to the panel. Jeffrey.
What seems to be a common theme in many states is educating the public about the opportunities that exist, and budgets are strapped, and it's difficult to create the campaign.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to a little bit about, you talked about how Ameren's different than ComEd. Can you talk about what the state or the commission does, a website that would help people in the Ameren territory know more, have a place to go to get more information? I mean, events like
Sure.
your attendance is one example, but this is a one-off. Do you have other campaign or education efforts?
Sure, and that's through the Office of Market Development that I had mentioned earlier. You can go to our website, and actually, I think it's, I've done it a few times. It's fairly easy to navigate, and you can find out about repo men and towing and all that if you want to, but you can also find out a lot of information about market development, who the providers are in different places, what their track record is, because we're tracking complaints and other things about the alternative suppliers as well. You can find out what the prices that are offered are. So there's a lot of information there, and then we're very fortunate to have a gentleman named Torsten Clausen who actually runs that Office of Market Development for us, who's always more than willing to talk to people. He and the folks in his group are more than willing to talk to people about these issues and try to, obviously we don't steer anybody toward a particular provider. It's not what we're about. We're about trying to promote the idea of competition so that we can get better prices. But Torsten is a font of information, and so I would recommend people either go to our main website, icc.illinois.gov, or go to plugin.org, which is our separate piece, which is just for retail competition, or give Torsten a call if you can stomach listening to how good Bayern Munich soccer team is. He'll give you that whole thing too. He's a very proud fan. So hopefully that, and we do a lot of events like this. I'll go talk in a lot of different places. We saw each other in Maryland when I was speaking at an event there, and a lot of the events that I go and talk to are competition events where we're talking to people about what the experience here is in Illinois, a lot in the state and then a lot outside the state as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.